Hello, everybody. This is Gary Wilson, and welcome to this week's live Investor Agent webinar. And welcome aboard to all the new agents from mostly Louisiana. Some of you are from Georgia, okay? And actually, we have people from all over, but the newer ones are going to be from Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and Louisiana. So welcome aboard, and welcome to all of you veterans. I see some of you are here from the Golden State, California, and even oh my gosh, we got some Canadians on, so welcome aboard. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, a little bit of housekeeping. For those of you who are new, and if you're listening in recorded mode, this is interactive in live mode. Everything is recorded, including the Q&A. If you have questions, please type them in your question box, and I will get to them. We'll take a breather every few moments or so. Okay, also look for the recording again the very next day. So tonight we do have a special guest. Her name is Linda Schneider, and I've started working with her in the last few months, and you've noticed it because I'm sending you a newsletter now. Every month you log into the My Investment Services website, and you get this newsletter, and there's lots of content in there, rich content that you can use to help yourselves become more informed, and also plant some seeds in your minds for what you can do with your clients and how you can best serve them. And that's why we're here tonight, because Linda's going to explain to you how a newsletter actually works, how you can use it, and why you want to use it. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and start introducing Linda Schneider. Welcome aboard. Thank you very much for taking your precious time to join us tonight.
Well, Gary, thanks for having me. It's really my pleasure. And hello to everybody from sunny Southern California. We're having a beautiful afternoon here. And I always say that because you know, I'm proud to be here. I love the warmth and the sunshine, and I wish everybody could live here. But you're all in real estate, and you know that it's an expensive place to live. But wherever you're at, it's the right place to be right now for real estate. This is going to be a great year. I think we're looking forward to. I think the next 4 years with our Trump president is going to be great for the real estate industry, whatever else you might believe. So with that said, I do want to talk to you about the art of smart newsletter marketing. And Gary, if you have questions or comments you'd like to throw in, I'd sure like to hear them. And if anybody out there has a question that they'd like to enter into the chat box, please do that as well. So my business is called fastnewsletters.com. And I call it the home of the $13 a month newsletter. Now, I am a newsletter marketer, and I started this business as a result of being in real estate myself for 30 years. And as a marketer, as somebody who was interested in real estate marketing, of course, I did a lot of direct response marketing as well as newsletters, advertising, and such. But I found that newsletters were the single best way for me to reach out and keep in touch with my client base, as well as through some different techniques build new relationships with farms and with leads. So I'll talk you through some of that. And we decided to start this $13 a month newsletter business because we started getting calls from people saying, hey, can you help us design a real estate newsletter? We started writing real estate newsletters for some of the largest real estate companies, real estate brokerages in the United States, and then in Australia we picked up some, and then in Canada. And we realized that a lot of people were looking at spending a huge amount to join real estate newsletter programs, sometimes as much as $100, $120 a month. And when we looked at those programs ourselves, well, some of them we were actually writing the newsletters for. So some of them we were writing the newsletters, and people were turning around and reselling those for these large amounts. So we looked at that and we said, well, we can do the same thing. We can write a fabulous newsletter, one that's even better than I think what a lot of them are out there. And we can give that to people for $13 a month on a subscription basis. So that's what we decided to do, and it's just taken off like wildfire, because it lets you get in there and play with every speck of the newsletter so that you can make it your own. And so let's talk about why that's important. So in this brief course, I'm going to talk about 5 topics. The first is, do real estate newsletters work? And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So I'll talk with you about why that is. Why do they work and why don't they work? And there's very specific instances, and I can actually give you a small blueprint for how to make sure that yours work. And then tips for generating referrals with newsletters. The main reason that we use a newsletter is to generate referrals and repeat business. It's not the best tool for generating new business, for creating new relationships if you don't already have a relationship with someone. We'll talk more about that. Email or print, which works better? That seems to be a perennial question. And then finally, do you write your own or use a pre-written newsletter? So let's just jump right in. And as I said, Gary, if you've got any comments, just go ahead and toss them out. So if it's okay with you, I'll just go ahead and get started.
Perfect. Yeah, let's go ahead and get rocking. And what I'll do is that when I sense a natural pause, I'll check for some Q&A, and then we can go over those as we go through. That way it's more current, you know.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. So do real estate newsletters work? Well, oh, sorry about that. I did want to jump in real quick and tell you why I'm so crazy about newsletters. But yeah, well, I started business in 1980. So that just tells you how old I am and how long I've been in this business. When I started business, at that time, I had one of those old school brokers. Now, in those days, the only technologies we had were the telephone and our feet. And so the old school broker said to me, look, you're going to do 3 things to build your business. You're going to knock on doors, you're going to pick up the phone and call at least 5 people a day, and you're going to send newsletters. And that's it. That was the entire business model at the time. And so I put together a newsletter, and there it is. And it looks, it looks absolutely awful. It's just plain, but it did the job. And the content was completely from my own head. I didn't have the internet to go out and grab stuff from. And so whatever I could write, whatever I could think up, I could write down. And that became my newsletter. I did this for about 4 years, just knocking on doors, making those calls, and sending out this newsletter, and built up a pretty good business. I didn't know any better. I had just a great broker who wouldn't let me listen to anybody else. And after 4 years, I had an opportunity to move on. And at that time, she suggested to me that I look at finding somebody who would want to buy my business. And so together we looked around, we looked through the community, and ended up finding somebody to buy my business for $22,000 cash. Now, Gary, $22,000 cash in the 80s, that was pretty good. I can times 10 that and say, okay, I left the business with what would be the equivalent today of around $200,000 cash. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty good, and it let me get another start, in the next place that I went. And what I discovered, that this was just such an ideal tool for filling a long-term pipeline, because I can make a relationship from the beginning, and it can be a great relationship, and I can even make a person's dreams come through and help them buy the best house, the best investment on the planet. But the day after that transaction closes, they're going to start to forget me. And it doesn't matter how important that deal was. If I don't stay in touch with them, they're moving on with their lives. They've got other things going on. They don't want to think about me because they don't need me right now. I'm no longer a part of their life. So I've got to make myself a part of their life. The best way to do that is just to keep in front of them all the time with that newsletter. And of course with a follow-up strategy as well. But the newsletter was the piece that it was like the connective tissue that allowed me to do the other parts of my marketing program that made those work just as well. So it's not necessarily the newsletter itself that is going to do all the work, but it's part of the strategy. It's the connective tissue for an entire strategy. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so let's move on then. Now we will go back. I'm going to just pop back here to my topics. Do real estate newsletters work? Okay. Well, I'm going to give you the positive perspective first, because you can go out there online, you can talk to anybody in your office. If you turn around right now, if you've got an office with more than 10 people, there's probably somebody in your office who uses newsletters and who would tell you, oh my God, that's the best thing ever. And you probably find somebody in your office that says that is the biggest waste of time ever. So sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Here's some positive perspectives. I was surprised when I had 9 people respond to my first newsletter quiz. I thought I'd just start sending it and maybe 1 or 2 people would notice. Now, I've heard this kind of thing over and over where people say, do I really want to put a quiz in? Do I really want to thank people? Do I really want to use a testimonial? I mean, that's kind of corny stuff. But you know what? It's that corny stuff, Gary, that works. It's that stuff that people love to respond to. People love doing the Sudoku puzzles. People love answering the quizzes. People love the kind of the Where's Waldo sort of things. Sometimes I'll use a picture and I'll say, where is this in the neighborhood? Little things like that you can add to your newsletter to create interaction. People just eat it up. It's not all about having articles. Another positive perspective. I get 3 to 5 new clients a year because of my newsletter. When I ask new clients how they found me, it's always a friend referred you or a friend sent me your newsletter. This is another thing that surprises people. They think they're sending the newsletter to keep the relationship going. Well, they are sending it to keep the relationship going. But suddenly out of the blue, people will get calls from people they've never heard of before, and that person might say, oh yeah, somebody told me, I can't even remember who told me about you. Or somebody sent me your newsletter. So the relationships that result in referrals can even be somewhat tenuous. But when you have the newsletter, you've got this tool that somebody can actually hand off to somebody or share with somebody if it's an email newsletter. And so don't be surprised once you start using the newsletter that you're going to get clients coming to you from out of the blue because of those referrals. Here's another one. I mail a quarterly newsletter to around 1,500 people in my farm, and I've been doing so for about 10 years. I always include quarterly market statistics and some article of local interest. Now, I usually get 1 to 5 listings from each newsletter, but the results didn't happen overnight. In fact, it was more than a year before I got a listing that I can attribute directly to the newsletter. And again, I'm just going to show you in a minute that this is pretty typical. People tend to want to farm with newsletters because they can reach a lot of people without actually having to be in person with a lot of people. And so they might try this for 6, 8, 10 months, a year, and it doesn't really work until you've been there for maybe years. So if you're planning on using newsletters for a farm, you have to do more than just send the newsletter to make yourself visible, and you have to keep doing it for sometimes years to see the results. It's definitely a long-term strategy. Another positive perspective, my newsletter is the core of my geographic farming program, and I couldn't do without. People stop me all the time and thank me or ask me about the market. It's been 3 years, but I have over 12% market share in that neighborhood. My newsletter program has generated over $27,000 for me this year. Our newsletter has generated more than $1 million for us. These are all very positive perspectives, and every single big real estate office is going to have somebody who's quietly going around just doing their newsletter business, their newsletter strategy, and raking in a lot of money as a result. And what this is doing is it's building up a pipeline for them. I call it an invisible pipeline, because you don't have a database filled with all these people who are going to do business with you. You have a database filled with people who are your silent army. They're the ones that are going to spread the word about you because of your newsletter or through your newsletter. So your pipeline is sort of a silent, invisible pipeline, but it's there. The bigger the visible part of your pipeline, your actual database of people that are getting your newsletters, the bigger your invisible pipeline. All right, so let's look at some of the negative perspectives. I was mailing a monthly newsletter with each addressee's neighborhood stats plus county stats for their county for about a year. Then I stopped. I'm certain people were reading it, but I also noticed some people would list with someone else. You try something for a year, and if it doesn't work, you move on. Well, that just speaks to what I was just talking about. You try something for a year, and if it doesn't work, you move on. But in marketing, there's something called split testing. And split testing means that you try something one way, and then you change something, one small thing about that, and you try it that way. And then you compare those two things. And if those two things, if you see something different between the results from one way, say the A test, and the results from the B test, then you know that the thing you did in the B test worked or didn't work if your numbers actually dropped. And so with a newsletter, if something isn't working, rather than just dropping the program entirely, I always suggest that people try something a little bit different. So we take a look at their newsletter and do an evaluation of the newsletter. And, you know, typical things I see a lot of marketing newsletters that look like they were put together by a marketing company, and they're very glossy, and you know, they've got a very expensive look to them. And sometimes I'll say to them, well, why don't we take that content and just put it into something that looks a little more homemade? And we might try that. Or we might say, you don't really have anything personal in here but your picture. Let's try a little personal note from you. And we'll just try one thing at a time and see if the results change. And sometimes if it's something they're just not happy with, we'll just do an entirely different newsletter and see if that works and compare the results. So the point is, don't just say, no, the newsletter doesn't work. Look at the actual newsletter that you're using and see if there's something that you can change about that, and then try something different. Because I know newsletters work, they work for a lot of people, and they don't work for a lot of people because of something going on either in the way they're using it or the way the newsletter looks. All right, another thing I hear a lot, don't do them, waste of money. You guys have all been in real estate for a long time. You know that, well, most of you have, I'm sure. You know that you will hear every single kind of perspective. For decades, I door knocked, and I've written a great book on door knocking. And I know that door knocking works to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And yet every single time I mention door knocking at a real estate convention or a real estate seminar, I get people telling me, oh, what a waste of time. I would never do that. And so that has taught me not to listen to people who say, don't do that, that's a waste of money. Because for every one of those, you're going to find someone who says, do it. You'll make a lot of money. All right, another negative perspective I hear. I mailed newsletters for about 9 months with market updates and other local content, got no interest, no response. Another one. I sent 500 newsletters to my farm for over a year. I got 0 calls, too expensive for too little return on investment. Now, that is an important point here because return on investment is pretty critical, and a lot of people are going to email newsletters because of the cost of mailing newsletters. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. You can use email newsletters, and they can be effective if you do them the right way. So I'll talk about that in a bit. And then don't bother with an email newsletter. No one reads email. Well, I just spoke to that. Okay, so why do some newsletters work then, and why others don't? I know that didn't make sense, but you get the point.
Yeah.
Elements of an effect. Oh, did you want to say something, Gary?
Actually, just a quick interjection. You're absolutely right. There's a concept. Imagine a triangle, and each point of the triangle has a different term, and the top is your market. So you have to understand who your market is, and why they should listen to you. The second part is your message, and that is what are you saying to these folks? What is your messaging? What type of language patterns are you using? How's it going to resonate with them? And the third part is media. How are you communicating the message to the market? And so newsletters is that media. So when you have those three things in alignment, you get much higher responses, and you're touching on these. So I'm going to let you go because I know that I can see that the message sometimes is not what is not correct. Sometimes it's the wrong market. You don't have, you're not using the right media for that market. But over time, I will tell you, it absolutely is a long-term endeavor. Because it builds up momentum over time, and that's why, just like a lot of other marketing, this one in particular, you have to give it at least a year to see substantial results. But then over time, it just keeps building, and you build your client base over and over, or excuse me, more and more. So in any case, I appreciate you making those comments because it reinforces some of what we're all being taught, which is consistency, momentum, making sure our message matches the market. I sense kind of you're heading down that path. So go ahead and keep going. I'll if I sense another opportunity, I'll jump in again and reinforce things.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And there's a lot of science behind marketing that applies to newsletter marketing, like your triangle that you're talking about. And I do believe that newsletters. Well, let's see, where do I want to go with this? When I first started in business, one of the greatest challenges that I had personally was believing in something that I couldn't see, was believing that something would work. And so if you're fairly new in business, you might be listening to various different people saying, try this or use this or do this. I had the benefit of having one hard-headed broker who told me this is the only way it's going to work, and I was too young to even go out and question it. And that was a blessing for me to have that And I would say to you that today there are so many distractions, so many possible ways to do marketing, that you really have to put all of the bells and whistles aside and just focus on something that will run what I call under the surface. So whether you're going to do website marketing, whether you've got a great opt-in program and some drip emails, or you've got you're fantastic at door knocking, or you do great seminars, maybe you do great direct response mail, whatever your thing is to generate new business, the newsletter program runs under the surface of all that. And as I said earlier, it's the connective tissue. Everybody that you touch with your other points of marketing, you worked hard to touch them. You spent money and, more importantly, time, and maybe even more importantly, energy and mental energy on touching them. And if you lose them, if you just throw them away, then you wasted that time, you wasted that effort. You might have learned something from it, and that's fine, but you don't have to waste that energy but if you have a newsletter program, because you can plug that person into the program. Even if they never do a bit of business with you themselves, they might still be a referral source for you. And a newsletter going out, especially an email newsletter where it's just a click of a button, it can go out to 200 or 2,000, there's no reason for you not to retain that person. Look, if you work hard to make a relationship happen in real estate, and then you ignore that relationship, you've just primed the pump for somebody else, for the next guy to come in and take that relationship over from you. All right, so let me talk then about the elements of effective newsletter marketing. And I'm going to do that by showing you some examples, and we'll go through those examples. So the 4 things that go into effective marketing. The first is the "Are you there?" question. Remember I was talking about those newsletters that look like slick marketing pieces, very high-end professional marketing pieces. A lot of times there's no agent present in those. Yeah, the agent's picture is there and the name is there, but there's no them there. They're not in there. You don't feel when you get that newsletter that they're actually there. You actually feel like they just slapped their name and their picture at the top of a generic newsletter. And because of that, people aren't stupid. They know when they're getting that kind of cookie cutter piece, and they aren't looking at those anymore. And so that isn't going to get you as good a result as if you put yourself into your newsletter. Formatting is another issue. Formatting, if you have a very, I would say, difficult to navigate newsletter, that is going to interfere with people seeing you as a credible source of information. I know that may not seem fair, but the way something looks, even your spelling, the colors you use, all of those things will play into how people see your credibility level, which is why a lot of people like those high-end, glossy, professional-looking newsletter formats. But again, that is sending a different kind of message. That's sending an "I'm unreachable" message. I'm untouchable. I'm aloof. And so you want to find a balance with your formatting that says I'm friendly and yet I'm still credible. And then in your newsletter also you want to have engaging and active content, and I'll show you that in just a minute what I mean by that. And then it has to be part of a larger marketing program, which I've alluded to. So let's just look at some examples here. Are you there? So let's just start with that. These are some newsletters that I get in my inbox. Now I fuzzied out the people in the ones that I consider to be negative examples. I don't want them to be called out for this. But this is a typical newsletter. It's an email newsletter, and at the top of it is what's called a masthead, and it contains the agent's picture and some contact information and their logo. And then the rest of it, sorry about that, the rest of it consists of a description. Welcome to the most current housing trends e-newsletter. This e-newsletter is especially designed for you with national and local housing information that you may find useful. This is all this does. This just tells me about the newsletter. It doesn't tell me what's in the newsletter. and it just says click here to get more information, to get the newsletter. So click there to get the newsletter and click there. And then sincerely yours. And then while I hope you find the information useful, you can click the unsubscribe link. That's the totality of this newsletter. And if I were interested in this newsletter, I would click that link right there in the middle and go to the actual newsletter. Well, I can tell you that every time I get this newsletter, I simply click past it because I'm just not interested enough in what she's doing here to move on. She hasn't piqued my curiosity, and I don't know what is going to be in the Housing Trends e-newsletter. I've looked at it before, and it's basically a website. So moving past that now, let's go to a different example. This next one is sort of the polar opposite, if you will. This one has a lot of the agent in it. Prescott Area Property Digest. Patrick is, he's just a terrific guy. He likes to play with his clients. And you can see that for his Christmas newsletter, they made up a card and made that the top of their newsletter. And then right away, he has a thanks for the best year ever. He's acknowledging the people who have done business with him. He's got something people want right there, the Zillow Home Value Index. You all can get that. You can get that and just use a little snipping tool and clip that chart out for whatever neighborhood you want in the U.S. In Canada, there's a similar program. I'm sorry, I don't remember it off the top of my head. But there are resources even in your own community where you can quickly grab a chart of something related to the home prices and throw that into your newsletter. And you really don't need a lot more than that. You'll see that Patrick doesn't do anything more than that. So he's got that at the top. He always throws in a new listing with a little video, which is great. People love interaction. They love to be able to click something. They love video. And then he goes on and he has a win a free coffee card, another point of interaction. And it's just a quiz question. And then he puts the person who won the last month's quiz and got the coffee card. Then again, he thanks people who have joined him. And then he's got some other resources, a report, and so on. So you can see there's a lot more interactivity, and a person would be a lot more interested in his newsletter than in this newsletter. Just looking at format alone, never mind the content that's in it. Let's look at another quick example. This one's from Cross Country Mortgage, and I chose this because one of the first things that occurred to me as I was looking at this, and I'm sure it's occurring to you, well, let me just ask you, who is this guy? What's his name? And you would quickly see that there is no name here, and that would be one of the first things that you would want to change in this newsletter. But the other thing is, you can see it's all the same. It's the same guy, and unless you're actually reading, it all says FAQ. It's all got the same thumbnail picture. It's all got watch video, except for that very first one. And we're skimmers and scanners. We live in an age of Instagram. We don't want to read to figure out what we're going to read. We just want it right there. And so the more you can, sorry about that, the more you can put something enticing here, the more I'm engaged with the very first thing I see, the more likely I am to take the next step. So I wanted to put that in so you could see that that's not necessarily how I would do a newsletter. Connect with Alex. There we see his name for the first time. And that's the entirety of his newsletter. And month after month, it looks exactly the same. Latest from the blog, FAQ videos. And I'm sure he spends a lot of time on those videos, so I'd love to see him do more to introduce each of those. Now here's an example, and I actually like this example. I would make changes to it. I would do it a little bit differently. But it starts with a picture. That's fine. And his masthead. And then it's got his photo with his contact information. But what I like about this one is it's got a lot of links that I can click. Now, that you don't have to use links in your newsletter at all. You could put the entire content on in your newsletter and have it read straight through. And in fact, I prefer that in my newsletters because studies have shown that people do not click those links. So 5 home technologies, to watch for in 2017. Did you ever want to live inside the home of the future? This could be the year that happens. Click through for a list of some of the coolest and most practical devices designed for your home. I might click that. I probably wouldn't save it. I doubt I would give feedback, but some people probably do. And I might share that if it's particularly interesting. I wouldn't share it from here, but if I read the article and thought that it was interesting enough, I do that. So I don't mind that because, and here's the main reason I don't mind it, it's got things for me to do. People like to click stuff. They like to think about stuff. So it's okay to occasionally have them click through to a full article. And what I do also like that he's got great headlines. 5 home technologies to watch for. What happens to my mortgage when I die? That's kind of an interesting title. Sorry about that. I keep doing that. Crucial steps to planning a successful remodel. Pros and cons of portable storage companies. So I like the titles. I don't mind that. I do mind the fact that they all look the same. There's no variation. It's clearly a list, a curated list being put together by somebody. And these are just links. So there's no commentary. I don't get a sense of this guy's interest in any of this content. So pros and cons for that sort of thing. All right, so is he in this newsletter? Yes, he is, because he's sort of prominent right here, and you get a sense, hello Linda, here are your articles for Friday. It sounds like he's engaging with me a little bit. He's got these very short headers, and then the share article, save article. It looks like he's kind of part of it. I would like to see down at the bottom him in there again, maybe just a, hey, call me, or maybe his picture appear there again, something where I see him in there. It's interesting. This guy seems to be in the newsletter, but he's not really. He's just a figurehead. He looks like a mannequin, poor guy. So I want you, if you were doing a newsletter and I were counseling you on how to do a great newsletter, I would want you to be in the newsletter much the way Patrick was with his fun Christmas card in the previous example. All right, so good newsletters have you in them. Formatting we talked about. Engaging active content. Now those were email newsletters. Let me show you some examples of print newsletters. And let's talk about engaging active content. These are typical newsletters. You've probably seen them around. In this one, you have all your market stats. Whether or not those are market stats that would interest the community, I have no idea. A lot of times people put market stats into real estate newsletters just because they need market stats and they want to put something in there because it looks cool to have a chart in there or a graph. But think about what people actually want and how they read it. When I come over here and I look at residential sales in April 2012, Hood River 4, I guess this means how many sold, total closed sales 10, high sales price. I guess that's okay to know. It doesn't really tell me a lot for my own neighborhood. So I would question whether that was valuable information to share or not. Total number of homes sold in Hood River County over the past several months in 2012. Again, rather than just throwing things into your newsletter for the sake of throwing them in, actually think about what people would want. And then I like commenting on them. Don't just throw a chart in, but giving them interpretation. So if this is the information that's important, then go on to tell them, hey, what this means for you if you live in Odell is that your home should now sell for 10% more than what it sold for 5 years ago. Something like that. Give them a little interpretation on that chart. That serves two purposes. It helps them interpret the information because not everybody can read a chart. And it brings you into the newsletter again. Now the other thing totally missing on this left side newsletter is any kind of interactivity. What do you want somebody to do? When I say interactivity, it could be a call to action, it could be an activity, it could be something to think about. So when you create engagement with somebody, it doesn't mean just back and forth between the two of you. You could be asking them to engage even between their own two ears with their own mind. But on this page, the only engagement actually being asked for, other than perhaps to interpret this data, is down here. Visit our website. That's the only place on this entire page where it says do something.
And
Now we come, yeah.
you should actually give them a reason to visit your website. So in other words, um, for the full report, you know, visit here, click here, give them the exact page, or in other words, give them a reason to go. Don't just say go there. They have to have a reason to go there, and you're absolutely right. Keep it engaging and interactive. So just like teaching a class, the more you can get students in the classroom engaged and participating, the richer the learning experience. It's just, and they're going to retain more. The stronger bond. There's so many benefits to that.
It's true, and you know this webinar format is a great example of how that's difficult because I'm sitting over here just talking to myself, and it's much more interesting when you're engaging with people. You know, on the other end, if I could see you, it would make a difference in what I would say to you. And you're doing the same thing in your newsletter. You've got to imagine them sitting on the other side of that newsletter and thinking, gosh, what is going to engage them? So let's go over here to the right side, and you can see this is a very simple newsletter, which I think is wonderful because you know, it doesn't take people a lot I call it cognitive load. It doesn't have a lot of cognitive load to get people to what you want them to read. And on this side, you can see that there's a call to action right down here. Are you a first-time buyer? Get my free guide. Now, to me, the one on the right is leaps and bounds better than the one on the left in terms of a call to action and for engagement. Get my free guide. Oh, there's something I can do. I can get something here. And because this is a print newsletter, he can't click through to it unless, of course, you're sending it as a PDF, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Let's look at another example. These are another two typical. Now this, the one on the right here is from our company, Fast Newsletters. And let me just show you the difference here. Again, thinking about interactivity and engagement. We've got a number of these places built in on our newsletter. Right up there, if you think hiring a professional is expensive, just wait until you hire an amateur. And that just gets people to see you as a resource for service providers. We like to put some kind of interactive puzzle or game or something in here related to real estate. This one happened to be, is this place real? Look inside to find the truth. Again, the call to action and the engagement here, it gets them to look at that picture because it's interesting, and then to read the caption above it, and then move into the interior of the newsletter from there. Down at the bottom, pocket an extra $5,000 when selling your home. That's a headline that might get somebody's interest if they were selling, and then schedule a listing consultation right next to that, the call to action. Also, in the article itself, we often do this in our articles. We create an article. All of our articles are written from scratch. And then sometimes we'll put an activity in the article. This is from February 2016, but this month's newsletter is January 2017. And so in the front page of this month's newsletter, we had a goal-setting activity. Just stuff to get people engaged with the content in some way. Not just calls to action to call you, which is what most people think of a call to action, but calls to action, just take action of some kind. Now over here on the other side, I just pulled these right off of the internet. So these are real examples. I fuzzed out all the contact information. I had to really look for the calls to action in this one. And I found them. I would have thought that this box right here, this yellow box surrounded in blue, would contain the call to action. And in fact, it does. It says, call me today for more information on how a home warranty can benefit you. Okay, if I happen to be buying a home, but we know that less than 1% of people are actually buying a home at any one time. So that call to action isn't actually doing all that much for the average person who's reading a newsletter from you. And then up at the top, we've got when you understand the process of buying or selling a home, you're equipped to make the best decisions. Call me today and I will assist you every step of the way. Okay, again, if I am buying, I'll do that. And down at the bottom is a request for referrals, which I do like requests for referrals. Please refer them to me. So they're here. You just have to dig for them. I don't believe in making people dig for stuff. I want it to hit them right between the eyes, which is what I try to do in my newsletters. All right, so just to summarize again, the elements of effective marketing, newsletter marketing, Are you there? You've got to be in there. Formatting, it's got to have good formatting that leads people into the content and helps them see you a certain way. Has to have engaging, active content and be part of a larger marketing program. Let me just summarize those slightly differently as rules. Show yourself, be more than a masthead, ask questions, mention local areas, add testimonials. Remember I said that I like using a picture from my neighborhood and saying, where is this? Kind of the Where's Waldo idea. Very easy to do if you're just looking to fill a big chunk on your newsletter, yet create a ton of interaction and local credibility too. Terrific technique. Use content that creates engagement, like that photo. You want them to click, you want them to think about questions, imagine something, guess something. You can use a Sudoku puzzle. Whatever you're doing, just make sure they engage in some way with that content. Format so it's easy for readers. Any complexity, like where do I click for something, or a weird layout like overly large fonts will turn people off. And we all know that a confused mind always says no. Create a marketing strategy. Your newsletter doesn't stand alone. It's got to be part of a larger strategy. When those people were saying newsletters don't work, they're a waste of time, or I tried this for a year and it didn't work, that's all they did, is they threw a newsletter out there. But remember, it runs along underneath the rest of your business. It's the connective tissue. It is not the only thing you're doing. It's not the full skeleton. So your bus bench ads, if you're doing a neighborhood farm, door knocking, check-in calls. Are you making those calls 5 or 6 a day just to check in on people? I knew a woman in Denver. I used to do presentations for by referral only, and I would go to these quarterly seminars in all kinds of cities all over the country and in Canada, in the U.S. and Canada. And I would meet the most interesting people, and I would find out how it was that they built their business. And they would tell me such disparate stories, from the guy who would sit at vacant houses and hold open houses nonstop all day long for the first several years of his business until he became the recognized name in that industry. And then this other woman who would make these check-in calls, 5 calls a day. She would call other services, other businesses, and just talk to them about how she could help anybody that they could refer to her. And she became the #1 agent in Denver for her time. Anniversary of purchase cards. People love getting those. Oh my gosh, my agent remembers that I bought this house 20 years ago. People love that stuff. Open house invitations, just listed, just sold cards. Whatever it is that you're doing, your newsletter runs along underneath the surface. All right, so those are my rules for effective newsletter marketing. And then remember to A/B test those newsletters. If you're not getting any kind of response, because a good newsletter should get, even just, hey, I love your newsletter. Wow, that's a pretty cool newsletter. That was fun. I like including that quiz question contest in every newsletter, where you ask a quiz question and then you say, anybody who sends in the answer, I'll enter you for a drawing to win a coffee card, a Starbucks card. I like including that because it's a good measure of whether or not people are listening. And another one you can do with that, if you like using the contest, send me a real estate question. Anybody who sends me a real estate question, I'll enter you for a drawing for a Starbucks card. And then you answer that real estate question in the next newsletter. So you're fulfilling 2 purposes there. I'm full of these techniques. Later I'll give you my email address, and you're welcome to email me and ask me for ideas if you've got a specific point that you're stuck on in your newsletter. All right, so that's rules of effective newsletter marketing. How are we doing our time? We're just about out, so I'm going to plow ahead. Generating referrals with newsletters. We know that referrals are the #1 way that people find their agent. Use testimonials. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid of testimonials. Don't be afraid of the words, please refer me. I've got a client who always, every single month, puts a testimonial on the back page of their newsletter along with the photo of the person. These guys have a phenomenal business. They're very engaged with their people, with their clients. Create a referral mindset when adding people to your newsletter list. You're not just saying, hey, I'm going to put you on my newsletter list, or you're not just doing it incognito. Actually tell people, hey, I want to put you on my newsletter list because I want you to remember me when you hear people talk about real estate, and let them know about me. Is that okay if I do that? And then add them to your newsletter list. So create that mindset right away. Call and ask for referrals in person. Refer to an article. If you're sending the newsletter regularly, you can call somebody up and say, hey, I thought of you when I was writing that article about the storage units being converted into homes, because I know that you guys were talking about adding on an extra. I don't know. You can make something up, make some connection up to the article, but it gives you a great reason to talk to people when you're making those follow-up calls. And then graffiti your newsletters. Handwrite a small note on the outside if you're sending print newsletters. If you're sending email newsletters, pull a few of those emails off your list and then send them a personal subject line for a few of those emails. Ask people to share your newsletter with others. People will do that if you remind them to do that. Every time you talk to them on the phone, hey, please give the newsletter to somebody else you think needs a great real estate agent in their life or needs to be connected to a good mortgage broker. And they will. They'll share you with others, and that person will join your list and become a referral source or a business source for you. All right. Write your own or use a pre-made newsletter. Now, I'm going to touch on that email versus print in the context of doing this little section here. A lot of people insist upon writing their own newsletters. I jumped on Active Rain the other day, and I just put out a survey question and said, how many of you write your own newsletters? How many of you use pre-written newsletters? And what are the pros and cons of each? It split right down the middle. People say, I love writing my own. It's free. I have complete creative control. I can make it all local. I can send it on my schedule. And then other people were saying, I don't do that. It takes a lot of time. It costs me in terms of time. The content isn't always easy to find or engaging. And actually I threw that in because a lot of times I read the newsletters that are written by some agents, and it's not very engaging because it's very real estate heavy. A lot of agents think that your real estate newsletter has to be all about real estate, when that is actually the opposite. Very light on the real estate, because remember, only 1% of people are moving. So light on the real estate content, heavy on the engagement. That's what will make the newsletters interesting to people.
That's
and
so
also,
critical.
I'm sorry.
It's so critical too, because when I went about this endeavor, I've actually had a newsletter in the past, and I did create it myself, and it lasted a few months. This is going back like 10 years. And it took so much time. I was horrible at the formatting and all of the creative stuff. Another thing too was it was all real estate. So I paid attention over the years. What newsletters get my attention? You know what it was, Linda? It was the ones that had really cool, rich articles like about travel, or some really easy recipe I can make on my own at home with 3 ingredients. Just a variety of stuff that touches the other 5 or 6 areas of your life, and those are the ones. Those are the ones that grabbed and kept my attention.
Yeah, totally. And in fact, I like certain websites. There's one called Mental Floss, and it's nothing but fun stats and fun articles, and often I'll pull from there to add tidbits into my newsletter, just because it's funny. Where did a particular word come from, or why do we use a certain thing a certain way? These are things that everybody can get into, everybody can relate to, and that's how you engage with people. Yeah. And then that'll make the real estate content go down a little bit easier too, to quote Mary Poppins. All right, and then pre-made newsletters. So the pros to using a pre-made newsletter, a lot of people said, well, then it gets done. I'm just not good at getting things done, so this gets done. It saves me time. I don't have a lot of time, and I don't have a lot of mental bandwidth for this. I just need to have it done. And it's more professional than what I do myself. The cons, these are almost the opposite of the others. It gets done, but it constrains your creativity. It costs you to have a monthly subscription, even though it saves you time. And it has a professional look, but it may lack personality. You may not be in there. And we looked at these when we were creating our own newsletter, and we said, how can we combat these while still providing these? And that's how we came up with fast newsletters. We said, well, we want to give people a tool that they can get into and they can mess around with. Because you're entrepreneurs. You like to mess with your stuff, your marketing. You believe strongly that you've got the best way to approach your customers, your clients. And I believe that too, and still you need to save time. So the combination of having a pre-written newsletter that you can get into and change anything you want helps you get it done and gives you some more creativity. Cost, we decided that we can do a newsletter and share it out. Because you're going to be customizing it, we can do a monthly subscription at a very low price, and then you can go in there and create something that you like. And it has a professional look, but because you can, again, go in, and because of the way we build in specific places where you have to enter your personal contact information, we sort of build in the personality to it. So here's where we get into the email versus print, and I'm going to show you an example of our newsletter. On the right is the print newsletter, and on the left is our email newsletter. Now, if you went with us, you would get both of these in our service. Hang on a second. Let me go back on that. So this I'm going to go over here because it's easier to read. This would appear in your customer or client's email inbox just as it is. This is an HTML newsletter. So they don't have to click on a PDF or a link to get to this. It just opens straight out, and they just scroll through this content. Now, these are responsive, so if they saw this on their phone, it would all adjust. Like this piece goes up above and so forth, so it all adjusts automatically for the phone screen, for the different screen size. But just again, looking at the content, this is a little simpler than the other one I showed you. Summer means maintenance. Again, this is a call to service providers. Sometimes we put something different in here, like, hey, it's time to find out what houses in your neighborhood are selling for, because interest rates just jumped, and that might mean that prices are falling, or something like that. We put just some sort of a teaser in there and an invitation to give you a call to find out more. Special request, keep me in your phone. And again, sometimes they're long like this, these calls to action, and sometimes they're very short. But the whole point is, it sounds personal, it sounds like it's coming from you. When I use a high-end service, whether it's legal, medical, or financial, I want to work with a problem solver who truly cares about the quality of my experience. So this feels like you're here inside this newsletter. Why do we love looking at houses? We people. But then in the end, we very often put you back into it. When we're looking at houses, I believe we're experiencing them, not just seeing them. Now, that may seem like it's not important, but having that I in there, that brings you right into the newsletter without even having to use your name or your picture. And on the email newsletter, we don't do this on the print newsletter, but you could certainly say remove this article or remove down here and put in a personal note. But at the top of the email newsletter, we leave a place for you to actually write a personal note. That's because space is not at a premium in an email newsletter. We can just keep adding sections in. And while this is designed in Microsoft Word or Publisher, and I believe we have a Pages version also, where you can just play around with any of the elements you want. This is just page 1 of a 4-page newsletter. On this, you would use MailChimp, drag and drop editor, to just pull elements in, chunks in, and then click where it says to click. You can't see that right here, to add the photos. It's all fairly automatic for you to create this newsletter. We create it for you. All you actually have to do is go in where we say and make the changes, like the personal note. You would want to put in last month's winner of your contest if you were using the contest, and so forth. Okay, so I zipped through that. Now, should you use a print or an email newsletter? Most people will tell you print works better. And I agree most of the time. But if you happen to have a clientele that responds to email, and you happen to have a great email presence, and that's why I put this one back in here, I wanted to show you this. If this is the kind of newsletter you're doing, then email will not work as well as print. Print will definitely work better for you than email. But if you're doing something like this, where you're so there, when they open that newsletter, even if they didn't read a speck further, they'd go, oh, hey, that's Patrick. He's such a cool guy. He's a quirky fella. They'd know that right off. And then they'd probably read down. They'd read a little bit further down. And nothing is very long. Just allows you to get into the meeting. Oh, new listing. That looks interesting. I'm going to click that video and move through the content very quickly. So we try to make it engaging with short pieces so that people will get used to it, used to seeing those elements in the newsletter, in the email newsletter, and that will encourage them to click the second time, the third time, the fourth time. Most people, once they've subscribed to you, they're likely to click the first time. So if you can catch them that first time, you can get them to come back the next time, the next time. So in that way, I think you can use email. If it were me, I would probably do both. I would probably, because it's expensive to print and mail, I would possibly pick my top 50 people and mail them the print version, and email everybody else. So I'd segment my database. And so in our business, we try to provide both. And so we say that you should do both. And most people will say, oh, I want to do an email because it's cheaper. That's not the best reason to do it. But when you're setting up your email, or when you're setting up your contact list, if you're just throwing it out to people and not giving them any kind of warning, you're going to get a much lower response rate than if you're contacting them in some way. Even if you send them a personal email ahead of time and say, hey, I'm going to start this newsletter, that's another way to sort of raise the attention level on that email newsletter, so you start to get their eyeballs on it. And then keep the very top of it very personal. You've got to be very there in the top of the newsletter, and keep it short so that they can move through it quickly. Not so important in your print newsletter. In fact, our newsletters, you can get a custom header made with your photo and so forth on it, and just slap that in there as an image. But page 4 is a mailing label page, and that's where your picture and your contact information go, other than your contact information throughout. So should you use print or should you use email? That's up to you, and it's mainly, most importantly, up to the kind of audience that you have. Very quickly then, I think we're about out of time here, Gary. Fastnewsletters.com is where you can reach out to us. Again, it's $13 a month. We have a 30-day money-back guarantee, and it's pre-written but fully customizable. You get both email and print for $13 a month, and we'll help you get it all set up. We'll do a walkthrough appointment with you on the phone, where we take exceptional care of our customers, so we'd love for you to give us a try.
And I can vouch for that. And I will tell you what, guys, for those of you who've been around more than a couple of years, you know that I always do things myself first before I communicate them to you, the students, and I've been seeking out a newsletter provider for quite some time, and thankfully my web developer actually found you, Linda, and introduced me, so I checked it out, and it's the same newsletter that you guys have been getting now for 2 months. You've received, well, actually one of them, and the second one is coming out. We're in the process of building it now. So keep in mind, one of the best things you can do to nurture a relationship is to communicate, and this is another form of communication. It's another medium, and I was writing a few notes as we were going through this. It does help you nurture your following. It does not have to be all about real estate. In fact, it shouldn't be. So these are just some key points that Linda brought up. But the other thing too is this, guys. I mean, it's $13 a month, and I don't get anything out of this, business-wise. This is just a personal favor to you, and my way to thank Linda for doing such a wonderful job with this, because we're expanding it. And I'm learning now. So another kind of a technical factor here is I do intend to send this out in printed form eventually. Right now, I just wanted to get used to building it and sending it to you online first, have you go to the website, download it from there, and do it electronically. But I do believe in print. It just was my choice to do it online first, and then once I've kind of mastered it and perfected it, let's go ahead and go print. And I tell you, it's actually very, very easy. You have some content already there. You add each month something you want to tell people personally. Obviously your photo is built. You add your photo in there. You can add other content from other sources, which is really awesome. Okay. So in any case, I hope you guys consider this. And we do have a question, Linda. It's from Daphne, and she's asking, will we have access to this information after the webinar? A couple things, guys. Again, this is recorded, so you'll have this recording the next day. You can replay it anytime you want. So it's on our database forever. And also, Linda, do you have a slide where you can show them your your contact information, a website, email, phone number,
Wouldn't
and
that have been smart of me?
well, we'll put that in the email that goes out tomorrow too. So they'll all have that. Even if you don't have it on the slide, go ahead and you can call it out again, repeat it, or if you have something in your a business card line or something. Oh, there you go. How about that?
There you
I'll
go.
be quiet while you type that in. So admin@fastnewsletter.com. And also, guys, Linda and her team are unbelievably responsive. I mean, far better than most of us agents are. So in any case, I hope you guys really enjoy this. I know I did, because it's a great way for me to refresh and remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's repetition is the mother of learning and the mother of success. And Linda, I have to ask you, you've been in business, you're an entrepreneur, you've been in real estate directly. Um, we have a great mixture of students in here. Some are veterans, some are really brand new, some are just starting to learn to work with investors and make that part of their business mix, which is really smart. But any words of wisdom, any final thoughts you could share with people? I mean, if you look back at where you were, 20 years ago, if you had the sage guru at your dispense, what could they have told you, or what would you like to share with these people before we call it a night?
Oh, wow. Everybody says the same thing, and until it hits you between the eyes and you really get it, you might not pay attention to it. But the most important thing is stick to what you're doing. Once you start something, don't quit. So if you knock on doors, don't dabble and do it a little bit. Keep doing it. If you send out newsletters, keep doing it. If you make cold calls, keep doing it. This is a business about continuity. It's a business about building a relationship, but those relationships don't happen through magic. They happen through dogged, hard work. It is hard work to do this business. It is the people who just stick to it that make the money.
Yeah.
That's my
Wow.
words of wisdom.
Great words of wisdom.
I wish it was more inspiring or more magic, but you asked me, when I look back, what would it be? That is it. Every time I've quit, I've regretted it.
Yeah, it's so true, and I wish I could have said it better than you. I mean, the only person I could think of, it's a famous saying, is Winston Churchill. 6 famous words: "Don't ever, ever, ever give up."
Yeah.
Maybe it's 5 words. I'm not sure, but
whatever.
but it's so true. I mean, and people have asked me before. I'd say 2 things: I wish I'd have started earlier, and consistency, persistence has got me far more wins than talent or skill or looks or any of those things, because I'm at average at best.
Right.
But one thing I am is when I set my sights on something, man, I just get after it. So thank you for sharing that, because it sounds like we're cut from the same cloth, and I want everybody on this webinar to really, I mean, just if nothing else, take that, give Linda a call, shoot her email, and see if you want to try this out on your own, and do it for a year, and I think you'd be surprised. For the $13 times 12, heck, you get one transaction. My gosh, it's less than a referral fee, So thanks again, Linda. I really appreciate this. I will stop the recording, and I will make sure Beverly copies you on the send out tomorrow, and I'll let you know when I'm out in the Southern California area, and perhaps I'll have you come to one of my classes and get up and speak for a few minutes in person.
I'd love to do it. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you everybody who was listening.
Thanks again. Okay, and thank you everybody for participating. For Linda and I both, God bless you all, and we will see you next week, which will happen to be, I believe, another Tuesday night, if I'm not mistaken. It is next Tuesday night, the 24th. Okay, you guys take care. Have a wonderful weekend, and good night. Bye-bye.